Hello, this is Dr. Douglas Husbands, a Institute for Functional Medicine certified practitioner, a doctor of chiropractic, and a certified clinical nutritionist. I've been in practice for over 28 years. By now, hopefully, you've seen all of my videos in the Leaky Gut series, and this is kind of like a bonus video of that. What I had mentioned in that series that hopefully you have watched. If you have not watched it, I do highly recommend that you do see that series on leaky gut. I mentioned about that it is necessary to utilize an experienced, well-trained doctor in functional medicine to truly help you through all the nuances and intricacies of healing leaky gut. And we've gone over all the importance of that, so I don't need to repeat all that, but to fully help you to really get back your health, you really need to see someone who has expertise in functional medicine. Now, in that video series, I just mentioned briefly about the 6R gut restoration program. And the 6 R's of the gut restoration program are reduce, remove, replace, reinoculate, repair, and rebalance. Reduce, remove, replace, reinoculate, repair, and rebalance. Now, let's go into the details of each component of that. Reduce. What do we need to reduce? Well, first of all, we may need to reduce some of the harmful foods that we are used to eating, and then of course later replace. We'll get into that. Replacing some of those harmful foods with more healthy foods. But besides foods that we like sugars, high sugary foods, high starchy carbohydrate foods, of course a lot of grains, a lot of cereals, a lot of pasta, especially if they're white flour pasta or white grains, rather having whole grains. Now, I can get into some details of this, especially since a lot of you may be familiar with lectins, where lectins are higher in whole grain products than in processed white flour products. So we can get into all the nuances of that, but I'm not going to go into details of that right now. I just want to introduce the 6R program. But basically, the foods that can be harmful for many people that are trying to heal leaky gut, you want to reduce those. What other things may you need to reduce? Well, we may need to reduce some of the bad bugs in our gut. I've mentioned in previous videos about things that will induce hemorrhagic enterocolitis, like, for instance, Clostridium difficile is one. Perhaps someone may have Helicobacter pylori, the organism that it basically burrows into your stomach lining. And by the way, there's never one of these things. There's many of them. But Helicobacter burrows into the stomach lining, suppresses hydrochloric acid production, and when you have decreased hydrochloric acid production of the stomach, then other microbes and harmful pathogens can get a foothold in the stomach lining and further down the GI tract. Some other pathogens or potential autoimmune triggers that I've mentioned that we may want to reduce will be such things like as Klebsiella, pneumonia, and Proteus mirabilis, as I've mentioned before. These autoimmune triggers can help to induce through the mechanism of molecular mimicry, as I've mentioned before, where your immune system starts attacking the harmful pathogen that is harmful in too high amounts, because we have to remember that we've got literally hundreds of trillions of mostly bacteria within the GI tract, and so when things get out of balance, if you get too high of these bad guys, then that can induce an immune response and through molecular mimicry, you start getting autoimmune responses where they attack the bad guy, but they start attacking your own tissues also. And I might add that whenever you get one autoimmune response, very often you see other autoimmune responses to other tissues being affected. Since we're discussing this, let me mention here that in particular, I see a lot of people with autoimmune thyroiditis, particularly Hashimoto's, as autoimmune hypothyroidism. And a lot of research studies show that many women in particular with autoimmune hypothyroidism, otherwise known as Hashimoto's, also have an autoimmune response where the cells that are the proton pumps of your stomach, essentially, those cells that produce hydrochloric acid, your body starts to attack those cells also. So many people many women in particular with Hashimoto's thyroiditis may also have the induction of autoimmune attack on the cells that produce hydrochloric acid in the stomach, and then you get downregulated hydrochloric acid of the stomach, and then you can have multiple problems. Anyway, so we want to first focus on reducing things. The next of the 6 R's that we want to think of is removing. We may need to reduce the pathogens, reduce the antigenic harmful food properties from our system, and we may want to do some things to remove. For instance, if we do find that we have someone with, again, using the example Helicobacter pylori, then in many cases, though not all, we may want to remove the amount of Helicobacter pylori that is suppressing the stomach acid. Now, the reason I say that in many cases, but not all, is because if you go to many third world countries, quite frankly, a lot of people, just many people, have Helicobacter pylori. And in that case, because of the way the immune system is developed to be able to fight off the we have a different environment in the USA compared to, say, third world countries, where having Helicobacter can be actually have some protective benefit in some of these other populations. So again, the process or the principle of biochemical individuality and one size does not fit all, that is a tenet of functional medicine, applies here. So, but in some cases we may want to remove things. Now, just as a functional medicine doctor and certified clinical nutritionist, I've found over 28 years in practice, there are many herbals and nutrient substances where it's safe. In this example, Helicobacter pylori, the standard way of dealing with that would be either triple antibiotic therapy or quadruple antibiotic therapy to take care of the H. pylori. Well, in a vast number of cases, that is not necessary. There are very effective herbals and nutrient combinations that are well researched that show that you can have resolution of H. pylori, Helicobacter pylori, using those methods also. So, remove. That's our second of the 6 R's. The third of our 6 R's is replace. What we may need to replace in the 6R gut restoration program? Things like mentioning about hydrochloric acid produced in the stomach. Just so you know, hydrochloric acid is extremely beneficial and very necessary, not only to help to break down food particles into smaller components so that by the time they get through the stomach and get down in the small intestine, that those food particles are broken down into these smaller components. For instance, proteins into amino acids, and components of B vitamins broken down in smaller particles. So by the time they get into the small intestine, they're broken down so that they can get through the hopefully healed leaky gut and properly be assimilated, that is absorbed and assimilated into our bloodstream without them being larger components, which in many cases may induce an immune response whereby you can set up autoimmune reactions being started. And so replacing hydrochloric acid is one example of what we may want to replace. Digestive enzymes is another thing that we may want to replace and may need to replace as far as helping heal our GI tract in total. Also, bile acids. I have many patients who come to me with, especially women, unfortunately, there's reasons for this, but anyway, women who have, or men, but I see mostly women who have had a cholecystectomy, in other words, a gallbladder removal. And when you do that, your bile acids that are produced in the gallbladder, you have decreased bile acids. And so what you need to do, amazingly, many doctors do not tell women this, or men, that you really need to replace the bile acids when you have your gallbladder removed. You cannot absorb fats well, any fatty foods, and they can be a real problem in people who do not have the gallbladder and therefore are not having production of bile acids. So replacing bile acids, especially in someone who has had a cholecystectomy, is very necessary and very beneficial. I have many people who, when you just supplement them with bile acid, they can again start having more fats in their diet, which is very important with essential fatty acids, necessary for anti-inflammatory benefit and brain function and neurologic function. The essential fatty acids are critical there. So moving on to the re-inoculate phase of a 6R gut program. Now, re-inoculation, you think of the probiotics that are there to re-inoculate. You want to re-inoculate your GI tract. After having antibiotics, you always, even during antibiotic use, you want to re-inoculate your system with beneficial probiotics. Now, let me say about some nuances and some questions that may come up about this. Well, first of all, let's talk about probiotic use during antibiotic therapy. Now, antibiotics are great when needed, and there are many times that people may need antibiotics, but more often than not, antibiotics are abused and they're given too frequently. However, when they're needed, they are needed, and I'm so thankful that we do have them. Now, what you need to do, you need to think, and this was mentioned by those who years and years ago in the 30s and 40s, when antibiotics were discovered and started to being given. There was a warning then that what's happening now is where you get antibiotic-resistant bacteria and microbes. And so in helping that not occur, probiotics taken 3 or more hours after an antibiotic is taken should be taken concurrently during a course of probiotics. During a course of antibiotics, sorry about that. Now, for every time a dose of antibiotics is given, you want to take a corresponding dose 3 or more hours after the antibiotic is given. You want to take a corresponding dose of probiotics during the course of antibiotic therapy. What that does is that actually helps to have a more beneficial effect via the antibiotic for the purpose that you're giving it. Many research studies confirm this. And obviously also you want to not have the disruption of your microbiome from the antibiotic as much as you would have if you are not using a probiotic concurrently. Now also with some very strong antibiotics such as ciprofloxacin is a particular antibiotic of the fluoroquinolone class of antibiotics. Now fluoroquinolones are actually, they have chemotherapeutic-like activities, and they also have antibiotic-like activities, and so research shows that when you take particularly the fluoroquinolone class of antibiotics such as Cipro, then you have disruption of your microbiome for oftentimes up to a year later. And so this emphasizes the necessity of taking probiotics concurrently with especially that fluoroquinolone class of antibiotics. And also you want to take the probiotics for at least 2 or 3 months after finishing the course of antibiotics. So reinoculation is a key of the component of the 6R gut restoration program that a functional medicine doctor like myself would be implementing to help you with healing leaky gut. The repair phase, the 5th R of the 6R program, repair. What things help repair? And what things may you need to repair? Okay, well, we've talked a lot about leaky gut, so obviously all those things that we've talked about in the other videos in the leaky gut series, as far as repairing the simple columnar epithelial cells of the gut lining, repairing the tight junctions of the gut lining so that you don't have upregulated zonulin, which is an indication of more leakiness of the gut. Repair if you have low secretory IgA, that is the shields of the gut lining. Then you want to use things like colostrum, beef bone broth to help upregulate secretory immunoglobulin A production, help the basement membranes of the gastrointestinal tract lining repair, the collagen formation for the basement membranes, and also your skin and other connective tissue, collagen found high in beef bone broth. All these things that can be reparative. Certain herbs can be reparative also. One of my favorite of all time is curcumin extract. Curcumin is a wonder herbal, a super herbal that has many beneficial properties to help repair, great anti-inflammatory properties, anti-cancer properties, gut lining healing properties, just a plethora, that is very many, properties for helping to repair the gut lining, as well as beneficial for many tissues in the body. Super herb, curcumin, one of my favorite. We just mentioning other things like essential fatty acids from fish oil, the essential fatty acids EPA and DHA, beneficial in repair, as far as also beneficial, obviously, obviously to someone who's done a lot of reading, and a lot of you probably watching this video, obviously, but the DHA and EPA, the essential fatty acids, beneficial as far as anti-inflammatory effects and beneficial for brain health and just all the repair effects. So let me move on to the 6th R of our 6R gut healing program would be the rebalance phase. In this rebalance phase, what do we want to rebalance? Well, obviously we want to rebalance not only things nutritionally, but also things in our life to where things may have gotten out of balance, such as clicking on, watching cell phones and clicking on internet, looking at funny cat videos and things at night when we're supposed to be asleep, and having the disruption of our melatonin output disrupted by the blue wavelength light coming in by clicking on these cell phones, especially for kids, parents. Put a limit on your kids with the, and yourself, be a good example. And as a dad myself, yes, me too. So I'm talking to myself here, okay? I'm there with you. All right, so yeah, the blue wavelength light from these cell phones, iPads, iPhones, anything, even TV, blue wavelength light coming directly into our little two eyeballs and suppressing the melatonin output by the pineal gland from our brain. That is something that we want to not get a habit in when we should be sleeping at night, so that you can get upregulated melatonin, which has an effect also on growth hormone output. Growth hormone, the major reparative, restorative hormone that is secreted primarily at night, about every 20 minutes during deep, rapid eye movement sleep. And so you're impairing that production of melatonin, growth hormone, and other restful, restorative, recuperative hormones that should be going on at night with these iPhones and iPads and the blue wavelength light coming into our eyes. Also, rebalancing our lives so that we're not responding or reacting to stress. Someone may cut you off on the freeway, and you can either start making all types of expressive hand gestures and having the short words with very forceful impact that do not really do you any good, or certainly not the other person in the car, and possibly getting in a wreck, making things worse. Basically rebalancing our lives so that you respond to stressors appropriately but are not so reactive. And that really rebalances the stress response of our body and the effects of too much cortisol being output by our adrenal glands, which can be detrimental not only to our gut but to our brain function, and are really not doing ourselves any good when we do that. Rebalancing also can mean laughing more, being thankful, finding humor in things, having a good sense of humor. So just rebalancing not only deals with the metabolic, nutritional, supplemental things that we're doing, but also, again, rebalancing our lives so that we have a more stable, balanced life that can really help our overall health in many things. So also, I want to mention one of my favorite things, rebalancing exercise. Quite frankly, there is no substitute for regular exercise. At 60 years old now, I'm not yesterday. I'm not the man I used to be. Okay, anyway, that old song, the Beatles, okay. Oh, I believe in yesterday. Okay, anyway, so at 60 years old now, boy, if I don't exercise, boy, I notice it. I mean, my wife notices it, our daughter notices it. I'm not the same person. I'm not as calm and relaxed, and so and also it does so much. And quite frankly, I'm a former competitive bodybuilder, and I used to be really big and work out really hard. Now I'm just focusing on, I just work out for my health. But exercising regularly 4 or 5 days a week, and it doesn't have to be like for me lifting weights and doing it at a pace where I don't have to do really that much additional aerobics separately, but that's for another series as far as types of exercise. But what I want to emphasize here is for balance, what you want to do is you want to do an exercise that you enjoy, that you're doing consistently and regularly, about 4 to 5 times a week, for about 30 minutes to an hour each day, and that is enjoyable and you're doing regularly. There is no, you can't take a pill, you can't watch an app, you can't watch TV, you can't, there is no substitute for regular exercise. It does so much for your mind and your body, and that is a component in rebalancing also. So I've talked a lot about a lot of things here. That's why in a 6R gut restoration program, you really do want to work with an experienced and well-trained doctor trained in functional medicine for a full gut restoration program. So, I've given you a lot of food for thought, pun intended, and I want you to really look at the videos that I produced, and we'll be producing more. And so please click below for subscribing to my channel here, and look for additional useful, helpful, and hopefully funny videos that I'm putting out regarding gut health and also the things I specialize in, gut health and mold-related issues and autoimmune conditions, and resolving those things, so that I can help you to diagnose the undiagnosable and treating root causes. Thank you, take care, and we'll talk to you soon.